And we're now on Daf Zayin Amid Beis. Now, if we've excluded the cases of Psul Machshav, of Chutzes Mano, Chutzlim Komo, of Pigul and Nosar, then we have no choice. By process of elimination, when the Torah says that Tzitzis Maratze, is Eno Nose El Avon Tuma, can only be a case of Tuma. And we're going to interpret it as if the pasuk says explicitly that the tzitz is nosein es avona tuma, and not only that, I have another push and another reason why I would interpret this avon as being avon tuma, shehutra michlola b'tzibur. That if you want to know whether the tzitz is maratze on, let's say, a korban yachid, in a case of tuma, let's say the basa became tamei, the kohen became tamei, and there is ritzitz. It makes sense that the isur here of tuma is relatively kal. What does that mean, relatively kal? Kal meaning it's lenient, and the answer is hutra michlolo. We have a principle all over Shas called hutra michlolo. Like, for example, isur chadash, after 16th of the Omer of Nisan, when the Omer was brought before Shtei Alechem, that's called Huta Mechlolo. We already have a heter that began to set in with regard to the Isur Chodesh after Tezvav, Tezayin B'Nisan. Here too, we already have within the world of Tumah B'Kodshim a heter. In what situation? In Korban Tzibur. So it makes sense that in Korban Yachid, even though there's no Tumah Hutra B'Tzibur, but we already have a Hutra Mechlala with regard to Tumah, and there is a scenario in which a korban could be brought B'Tumah, and it's allowed to be brought even L'Chatchila because Hutra B'Tzibur, that's what it says here in the Brisa, supporting Rav Nachman, and that's a Hutra Mechlala that makes it sensible, according to the Brisa, to assume in our analysis that when the Torah says that this is Maratza, it's Maratza on Tumah. It's Kachel Rav Sheshes. After all, this Brisa is absolutely outspoken about the definition of Tumah as Hutra B'Tzibur against Rav Sheshes. And at this point, Rav Sheshes is backed into a corner, and his only way out, as you know, we see this throughout Shas, is if you have a Brisa or a Mishnah that contradicts you, is to say Tanoihi. There's another Tana that supports my position. So this issue of Hutra or Tchuya is a machlokas tanoi. The tanoi, the sanya we learned in the Brisa, tzitz bein sheyeshno al mitzcho ubein she'eno al mitzcho meratze. Divrei Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon holds that even at a moment that the Kohen is not wearing, Kohen Gadol is not wearing the tzitz al mitzcho, let's say the tzitz is on the table, it still is maratz if the korban was brought at that time. I will see in a minute how Rabbi Shimon proves this almost conclusively. Rav Yehuda Omer no, bi odo al mitzcho maratza, ein odo al mitzcho ein maratza. Let's read the pasuk, says Rabbi Yehuda. The pasuk says, quote, v'hoya al metzach Aaron v'nasa Aaron es avona kodshim. So it has to be v'hoya al metzach Aaron. If Aaron is not wearing the tzitz on his forehead, then it's not maratza. And if it's sitting on the table, it's not maratza. What could be more explicit, says Rabbi Yehuda, than the pasuk? Oh, Rabbi Shimon, Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim yochiach. I'm going to prove to you that the tzitz is maratza, even if the Kohen Gadol is not wearing the tzitz al metzcha. Because, after all, there were two sets of begodim that the Kohen Gadol wore on Yom Kippur, the big day zahav, and that included the tzitz, and the big day lavan, big day bat. Those didn't include the tzitz. And in fact, whenever he did the avodah amiyuchedes, the special, unique avodah of Yom Kippurim, and he went lifnai v'lifnim, for example, to bring the Torahs, he wore only Dalit begodim. He only wore big day lavan, and big day lavan did not include a tzitz. And for sure, any korban that was brought at that moment would still be subject to ritzui. So that even if the tzitz is not al metzach Aaron, it's still maratza, because I'll prove it to you. even when the Kohen Gadol is wearing his big day lavan, he's not wearing 8 begodim, but rather 4 begodim, and the tzitz is not one of the 4. And nevertheless, and the tzitz is made of gold, by the way, which we don't take lifnai v'lifnim. And nevertheless, it's maratza on any carbon that he brings at that time. And that would mean even if the carbon contracted tumah, it's maratza. And now Rabbi Yehuda is really in trouble. His back is against the wall. This is a pretty explicit raya that tumah, in the case of tzitz, is maratza, even if there is no actual al metzcho, a tzitz being worn by the Kohen Gadol. Amallah, Rabbi Yehuda says, wait a second. Anach le Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim shetuma hutralo b'tzibur. What? I don't need ritzitzitz. You're asking me how could there be a case of tumah on Yom Kippurim where the carbon is kosher if the Kohen is not wearing the tzitz? I don't need the tzitz. I have a different reason why the carbon is kosher, and that's because the application of my principle that tumah hutra b'tzibur, and the karbanos of Yom Kippurim are mutar legamrei b'tzibur. They're totally mutar b'tzibur. It doesn't matter whether the Kohen is wearing the tzitz or not wearing the tzitz. Again, in order for the tzitz to have power, for example, in a carbon yachid, it's got to be al mitzvah, according to Rabbi Yehuda. But the fact that on Yom Kippurim there's ritzui for karbanos tzibur b'tumah, that's because tumah hutra b'tzibur. These are karbanos tzibur. So the Gemara analyzes that michlal. We see from here the Rabbi Shimon, who he adduced this proof from Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim that the tzitz is maratza on a carbon, even if it's not on metzcho, is savar tumah d'chuya b'tzibur. He, Reb Shimon, holds, like Rav Sheshes later on in history, that tumah is d'chuya b'tzibur, and therefore carbon tzibur needs ritzui, because really, when the Torah says that will allow you to bring the carbon b'tumah because the carbon tzibur, it means it's a violation, and we're not happy about it. But we want to get a situation where where the carbon is even a l'chachila carbon, and that's through ritzitzitz. So therefore, we see that Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda are arguing whether tumah hutra b'tzibur or not, and we could say that that brisa that we quoted as a raya to Rav Nachman against Rav Sheshes is of the opinion, like Reb Yehuda, that tumah hutra b'tzibur. Rav Sheshes, on the other hand, holds tumah t'chuya b'tzibur. He accepts the position of Rabbi Shimon. Regarding this machlokes, Tanoim, Rav Shimon and Rav Yehuda, there was never an argument about a case where the tzitz was broken. Everybody would agree, even Rabbi Shimon would agree that in such a case the tzitz is not maratza. The machlokes is the toli b'sikna. Sikna means a seid. The seid is a peg. So he takes the tzitz and he hangs it up on a peg, and the Kohen Gadol is not wearing it, but it's in complete situation. It's not broken in any sense. Rabbi Yehuda Savar, Rabbi Yehuda holds, no. There's no ritzui. Why? Because the pasuk says al metzach Aaron, v'hoya al metzach Aaron v'nosa Aaron es avona kadoshim, and the tzitz is not maratz unless it's al metzach Aaron. Rav Shimon Savar, on the other hand, there's another word in the pasuk. Rabbi Yehuda is going to have to deal with this extra word, and that is v'hoyal mitzcho tamid l'ratzon. It's always maratza lahem lifnei Hashem. My tamid. Why did the Torah add this seemingly superfluous, redundant word tamid? Elam, if you're going to tell me tamid al mitzcho, that he's always wearing it on his metzach, that's impossible. You cannot allow yourself the luxury, Rabbi Yehuda, of interpreting the word tamid as telling me that the Kohen Gadol is always wearing the tzitz al mitzvah. I mean, doesn't he go to the washroom? Doesn't he go to sleep at night? Milo boy lemeil lebeis hakisei. I mean, the Kohen Gadol, with all due respect, is kedusha, but he's a biological being. Milo boy meinam, doesn't he have to go to sleep? And when he's in the bathroom or when he's going to sleep, he's not allowed to wear the tzitz. The kedusha of the tzitz is a great kedusha, and its sanctity does not allow him to wear it in a way that there'll be tinuv if he has to go to the bathroom. So what does the word tamid mean? You can't take the word tamid literally. Ella, but rather tamid maratzahu, meaning it's always maratza. It's in the tzitz. It's not the gavra, the kohen gadol, who's wearing the tzitz. The ritu is inherent in the tzitz as long as it's shalem and it's not broken and it's on the table. That also gives it ritu. Otherwise, what are you going to do with the word tamid? So the Gemara immediately asks Rabbi Yehuda Nami Yaksiv tamid. How are you, Rabbi Yehuda, going to interpret the word tamid? Ishlema, we understood, supporting the sheet of Reb Shimon, that tamid means always, even if what? Even if it's not al mitzvah, tamid means there's an inherent power of ritzui in the tzitz itself. Then I understand the word tamid. Says Rabbi Yehuda, you know what the word tamid means? I have a secret for you. Hahu tamid shelo yasiach daito mimenu. The word tamid means that as long as he's wearing the tzitz, he has to have full intention and be actively aware, acutely aware, I would say, of the tzitz, and that the tzitz is on his metzach, and he constantly has to think about Kedushas Hashem, because the Shem Yudke Vavke is written on the tzitz, and Hesech Hadas is prohibited. So Tamid al Mitzvah means he should be aware of it. And where do we find such a halacha that you have to have constant awareness of something that's on your head, and you're not allowed to be Mesiach? A person is not allowed to be Mesiach Das from the tefillin that he's wearing on his head. And this halacha is derived actually from tzitz. From whence did Rabbi Bar Rav Huna derive this conclusion? From the tzitz. And here we'll turn just to the beginning of Daf Ches Amud Aleph, which we'll pick up tomorrow. Shema tzitz, she'ein bo ela azkara achas. The name of Hashem is engraved in the tzitz once. And Omer Torah al metzach tamid, al mitzvah tamid means be constantly aware, shal yasiach taitu, and don't discontinue your awareness of the tzitz. It's tefillin. Sheyesh ben azkaras harbe. There are 4 parshas of tefillin, Shema v'hoyim shemoah, Kadesh and v'hoya kviyacha. And in these parshas, all together, all told, 21 times Havaya appears. And certainly, therefore, alachas kama v'kama, you're not allowed to be Mesiach Das from tefillin. And therefore, you constantly have to be memashmesh in the tefillin. So we see from this drush of Rabbi Bar Rav Huna that the word tamid in the parsha of tzitz generates and teaches an isur hesech hadas from the tzitz, and that's exactly how Rabbi Yehuda will interpret the word tamid. And at this point in the sugya, which Hashem will see tomorrow, the Gemara wants to address the question, according to Rabbi Shimon, who said that the word tamid was teaching us that even if he's not wearing the tzitz, so then how do you interpret the pasuk that says, "V'hoya al mitzcho"? It's got to be al metzach of Aaron. Okay, then this is where Mr. Hashem will stop for today, and tomorrow we'll pick up Daf Ches. Thank you so much.